Okay, I guess I'm live, but it looks like it started a new stream. So hopefully everybody, if you're in the chat, Jim, tell everybody to jump over to this new stream where I am actually live. Can you see me? Okay, can you hear me okay? Okay. Well, hi, everybody. I do not see any chat now. Okay, well, TC didn't want to hang out with me, so I'm going to let him cruise on to this activity station. And tomorrow, coincidentally, is Super Dwarf Sunday. So the first Sunday of every month is Super Dwarf Sunday. We do that here at Behavior Education. And we feature one of our two Super Dwarf reticulated pythons, TC and or Ryder. Sometimes they're both in the video, but it's a lot of the times just TC because he wants out of his enclosure so much. And Ryder's pretty content in his setup right now. So for this live stream, I just thought I would go through some goings on here and update you about a few things. I do still have some 2023 calendars available. I do still have some of these polo shirts available, and I have a few notebooks available. So I'll show you guys those. And I'm here mainly to answer your questions and then tell you about a few exciting things that we have planned here at Behavior Education for 2023. My husband is on the live stream in another room, so he's going to help me watch the chat and hopefully let me know if you guys have any questions. So this is the first time that I scheduled a live, and I saw a lot of people in the live chat on the scheduled video, but I had to open this separately. So I hope that everybody jumps over here and lets me know that you're in the chat, because I saw several of my patrons in the chat, and I appreciate all of you guys being here. In addition to showing up for all of our Patreon live streams, I know it's a lot, but I appreciate your continued commitment to animal training and behavior. So I'm happy to see you guys not only on our Patreon live streams every month, but also here. Happy New Year, everybody. I know some of you are already experiencing 2023. We are not yet in Colorado. We have about 25 minutes to go. And a Colorado tradition is that there is a club that hikes to the top of Pikes Peak, which is a mountain range here in Colorado. It's a 14,000 foot mountain. And there's a group every New Year's Eve that hikes to the top of Pikes Peak, and they set off fireworks at midnight. So I'm probably not going to be able to see those because I'm not near a window while I'm doing this live stream. But maybe if anyone's in Colorado and on the live stream, you can let me know if the fireworks go off. Sometimes if the weather's bad and it's cloudy, we don't get to see them. So while I'm waiting for you guys to ask your questions, I will just show you the calendar because I have a few of these left. I initially just offered this to my patrons, and then I took some to an expo that I did a lecture at, and I have a handful left. So these are 2023 calendars. I call them Pythons Plus because most of the snakes in the calendar are pythons, but there's a few other snakes in here, like corn snakes and some of the other species that I have. So if you're interested in one of the calendars, you need to message me or put in the comments a way for me to get in touch with you, or email me at behavioreducationllc@gmail.com and tell me where you are, because the price is going to depend on if I have to ship these and where I'm shipping to, or if you can pick the calendar up locally in Colorado Springs or Ellicott. That's the town and the city closest to my ranch. So if you can pick them up locally, it'll save you a little bit of money on the calendars. Otherwise, I'm happy to ship them and I can give you a quote. It's been about $25 shipped if you're local in the United States, but I'd absolutely have to check about overseas. shipping. So I did a New Year's Eve live stream last year, and I thought I would make it a yearly tradition. I'm always up late anyway. And I thought, why not do a live stream every New Year's Eve? So here's what the polo shirt looks like. There's a button-up style. This is the women's specific style. So it just has this V-neck with no buttons. And then on the back is always be kind and love your animals, and my website. So then there's also a unisex or men's version that's a regular button-up polo shirt. So I really liked it. And then I just have a couple, I think literally 2 or 3 of these notebooks left. And they have one of my Morelia Bredli on the cover. This is Bennu. He's actually this Morelia Bredli that lives behind me that may or may not show up at the door wanting out during the live stream. But it is just a 3-ring binder notebook. And these are $15 shipped if they're going in the United States. But if you want one somewhere else, let me know. Or if you're picking up locally, let me know that too. So I usually don't have a lot of merchandise. That's what I have. If you're interested, let me know. Yeah, Natalia got a calendar, and a few of my patrons got calendars and said that they really like those. So the other thing I wanted to update everybody on is that this year I started collaborating with 2 other local reptile educators. And that's Jay-Z Proctor from Jay-Z's Reptiles and Troy Bumgardner, who is a zookeeper here in Colorado. And he's had a long career as a zookeeper, and he works specifically with reptiles. And we have come together and we're collaborating to bring to the residents of Colorado a series of live workshops and live educational presentations. And we're going to offer a wide range of subjects for beginner keepers, intermediate keepers, advanced keepers on subjects like nutrition, microclimates, heating and lighting, of course, training and cognition and behavior for snakes and lizards. And then we're happy to do requests if somebody has a request for a specific topic. And we're also doing hands-on activities during those workshops. So we'll be doing tabletop exercises for emergency preparedness with reptiles. We will do like hands-on mock enclosure builds and all sorts of just hands-on activities in addition to the lecture. And then we'll end each workshop with a panel discussion where the 3 of us will be up there just to answer general questions. So I'm really excited about that. And we are planning to record those and hopefully stream those outside of Colorado. The first one, let me look it up. The first one is going to be January 15th. And that is going to be from 10 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. It's on a Sunday. It's going to be in Colorado Springs. Now, we are going to add locations in Pueblo and Denver, and we're going to add some evening sessions. But for this very first workshop, we're doing a Sunday in Colorado Springs from 10 to 4:30. And it's going to be a combination of demonstration items, live animals, lectures, hands-on activities, and then the panel discussion at the end. So if you're local and you're interested in attending that, please email us at coloradoreptileeducators@gmail.com. Or you could just contact me directly and I will get you set up with that.
I don't know how to send a message, but there's people still on chat that aren't on here.
Okay, so Jim says that there are people on the original chat that aren't on this one. So I am going to tell them to jump over to the new one. You can tell I don't do many live streams because I thought that because I scheduled it, it would automatically start, but I guess it didn't. And so I've got people on that original scheduled one, and I've got people on this one. I'll have to figure that out, I guess, in the next year. Or somebody needs to help me. I'm very used to doing pre-planned classes, and I'm very used to doing pre-planned videos that I upload ahead of time. Some of them, because I procrastinate, I upload the day of, but they're always pre-recorded, whether it may be just a few hours before they're posted or a few days or a few weeks if I'm lucky. I pre-record them. So this is only the second or third live stream I've done since I've had the channel. Ashley and Joe, yay, you're here. So if anybody is still on that original stream, everybody needs to come over to this one. And I obviously need somebody to volunteer their time to help me with social media, because that's not my forte. Are snakes able to distinguish between shades of blue and green? Yes. And I'm saying that anecdotally because of my personal experience testing out different shades of blues and greens with my own snakes. So absolutely pythons and boas and corn snakes, to the best of my knowledge and to the best of the research studies that I've been able to find, can perceive colors in the blue, green, wavelengths, and possibly yellow, but definitely blues and greens. So I have tested that out a little bit by trying different shades of blue and green. And I notice a more salient behavioral reaction, as in the snakes notice right away when I use a royal blue, a really bright royal blue target, and like a really bright lime green target. So I really notice that those particular colors of blue and green are really noticed by the snakes. So I think that they probably can distinguish the different shade, and those are probably different enough from things they would see in their everyday environment that they're just extremely noticeable as soon as they perceive them, as soon as they're able to see them within their vision. And remember that when we're training the snakes, their eyes are always appearing open. They don't have closable eyelids, and sometimes they're sleeping or just zoned out and resting. And we need to make sure they perceive that we're there and the target's there and they see it and we're starting a session before we think that they're just ignoring us and not paying attention. Let's see. So if James Barentine is the one that directed you here, that's my husband. And he's in the other room on his phone. So he was nice enough to tell everybody to come over here. I have another question. What happened to Sunspear's tail? I saw it was damaged in a video. Yes. So Sunspear fractured her tail, and it was a complete transverse fracture of the vertebrae, one of the vertebrae in the end of her tail. How she did that, I don't know. She is out 99% of the time. And so she was out in a room with no other snakes, no other animals in there with her at the time. And I went in there to pick her up and put her in her enclosure. This was several months ago when I was still putting her back in her enclosure when I was going to bed. I'm really not even doing that anymore. So I went to pick her up to put her back in her enclosure, and her tail was bleeding. And I thought, oh my gosh, because she was acting completely normal. And then I found blood on the porcelain on the floor. And so I don't know what happened. I have no idea what happened. I presume that she probably had her tail coiled around something and fell suddenly. And either her tail maybe her tail got caught on something and didn't come loose, or it fell awkwardly, or something fell on her tail, because she does often knock things down off of counters. And she has knocked heavy things off of counters before. So I'm presuming she fell and either fractured her tail that way or something fell on her tail. So I took her to the vet the next day. She had radiographs. The x-ray films showed that she had a transverse fracture, a complete fracture of the vertebrae. I brought her home. We scheduled surgery, put her on antibiotics. She had surgery to amputate the end of her tail. It went super well. She got to come home the same day, and she wanted out later that night. She woke up really quickly from anesthesia, and she just hasn't missed a beat, and she hasn't acted like it's bothered her whatsoever. So it's a mystery as to exactly how it happened, but she's fine. And I did a lot of research, of course, following that to see how a tail amputation would impact their mobility. And there's really very little research on semi-arboreal or arboreal species of snakes who've had tail fractures and had to have tails amputated, and as to how that impacts their quality of life. But on all of the terrestrial species, it says it impacts them not at all. Like, it doesn't bother them, whatever. And there's snakes that fracture their tails in the wild, and they live with a fractured tail, or the end ends up falling off and they don't have any issues with anything. And Sunspear certainly has not had any issues with anything. She still does all her climbing and all her moving around, and she's just been fine. So let's see. Any other questions? Yeah, whoever typed question in big caps before their question, that helps me pick out. Ashley, you did that. That was a good idea. It helps me pick out questions from the chat. So if you have a question, yeah, just put question and then ask your question. Yeah, she's a hardcore snake. She's very adaptable. And I can see why carpet pythons, and Bredli in particular, adapt so well to human habitation. And while we all know that some wildlife becomes extinct or near extinct or threatened or vulnerable as humans encroach on their habitats, carpet pythons are one of those species that actually do quite well with human habitation and human encroachment. And in Australia, if I have any of my friends from Australia, people find them in their houses and their laundry rooms and their pools and all sorts of places. And there are snake catchers in Australia that remove them if you want. If I found a wild carpet python in my house, I would be like, welcome, you can stay here as long as you want. Because I know we live on a ranch, and especially in the winter, we get wild field mice that find their way into the house. And Sunspear and Boreth are excellent mousers. And they both kind of went into shed recently at the same time. And I hadn't seen any mice in a long time. And then I saw 2 mice running around, and I couldn't wait for them to come out of shed so that they could get back on the job. And we live out in the country. So the mice out here look pretty healthy. They eat our horse feed. I'm sure they eat some of our dog feed. We don't use pesticides or chemicals or poisons at all on our acreage. And so the mice out here, the feral cats eat them all the time. And I guess they're healthy mice. I have the snakes that roam, the snakes that are out a lot, like Boreth and Sunspear and TC. I have them go in for an annual wellness check every year. We check their fecals for parasites, and we do nidovirus testing, and we listen to their heart. And just every year they get a checkup because they are out so much. They interact with each other, they interact with me, and they're loose in the house a lot. So those in particular 3, and then my 3 inland carpet pythons absolutely get regular veterinary checkups. Let's see. Okay, so yeah, Joe asked about the wild rodents, and I don't have fecal checks done on the wild rodents themselves, but I have fecal checks done on the snakes. So I either take them to my vet and have random fecal checks done regularly on those 3 that are the 2 now. It used to be Ronan and Boreth and Sunspear, but Ronan passed away of cancer. So Boreth and Sunspear get regular fecal checks, and they've always been clear. They've never had any parasites show up. And then they also get regular, like, viral testing and other things done in regular wellness exams. I would not let them eat mice if I lived in the city, because it's just too unpredictable as to if people are putting out poisons or pesticides or what the city mice are ingesting. It could literally be anything. I don't really worry about it out here in the country on our property. I think the mice out here aren't exposed to anything other than what we have here on the ranch. And they're eating really well, and they always look fat and shiny. Their hair is always shiny. So if we lived in the city, I would not let the snakes do that. In fact, the first time I ever saw one of my snakes that was loose eat one here on the ranch, I freaked out, and I took the snake into the vet immediately and had a fecal done. And the vet's like, it's not a problem if you're not using poisons, pesticides, chemicals. The city would be different. Or if it was maybe a farm that was raising crops and using some kind of weird chemicals or pesticides, but we don't do that here. Let me see if there's any other questions. And Natalia is asking, how are TC and Ryder? Well, TC is out, and he's right here on this activity stand behind me. However, he's right here. he wasn't thrilled with me holding him, and he kept trying to climb to this activity stand. So he's laying on that activity stand right now. But I did make a video because tomorrow's Super Dwarf Sunday that post at 8 a.m. of me getting him out of his enclosure and giving everybody an me because I was trying to make sure that he had decent sheds, because he hasn't always had decent sheds. He had them and then he didn't. And I took him to the vet, and the vet said, well, if he's had more than 2 or 3 really poor sheds in a row, we'll do lab work. And we did that, and he was fine. And so I thought it was maybe humidity or he wasn't drinking enough. And when I upped all that, he still had a poor shed. And his last 2 sheds, I've done nothing special. In fact, he was out this past 2 weeks in a wooden box with a hole in it that's a hide that I have out in an activity station. That's where he chose to stay for his 2 weeks of being in shed, is this dry wooden box on top of 4 other enclosures at the very near the ceiling. That's where he stayed. So there's no water, there's no moisture. I did set a humid hide next to him, and he used it like within the last 24 hours before he shed, and he shed perfectly. So I don't really know. My vet says it's not just the outside environment, but also what's going on internally with the blood chemistry and hormones and physiology. And his last 2 sheds have been perfect. Ryder does not want out that much. He's much smaller than TC was at his age. And he also is living in that fabulous tree, that cat tree thing. And he's very content in there, and he just doesn't seem to want out. I let him out occasionally. I target him out of there just so that he can get some activity and exposure to being outside of his tree thing. But TC's the one that wants out all the time, no matter what. And he's always been that way ever since he was 8 weeks old when I got him. You know, he just wasn't having confinement. So he spends quite a bit of time out, but I don't let him stay out if I'm not awake and he's not supervised, because I don't 100% trust him around the other animals. I think he can be antagonistic with the other snakes sometimes, and with the dogs, like bluff strikes and air snapping. Like, he never makes contact, but I just don't like his passive aggressive behavior with some of the other animals. So he doesn't get to stay out if I'm not awake and working. Okay. How is Jim? Jim says he's well. Thanks for asking. Jim is tired because Jim works really, really hard around here. In fact, Jim started feeding the horses. We have 44 horses here at the ranch. Jim was out feeding the horses while I was feeding the dogs, getting ready for the live stream, getting shots for TC's video that's going to air tomorrow. And while I was finishing an online course that I've had all year to do, but I've waited until almost the last minute to finish the whole thing. So, and I'm going to have to ask Jim to help me out and let Luna out. Luna is my dog that's barking, if you hear her in the background. So our ranch is an animal sanctuary, and we used to have tons of different species here. Now we just have dogs, cats, snakes, and horses. But we used to have ferrets, different species of birds like ducks, chickens, parrots, cockatiels, finches. We used to have guinea pigs, chinchillas, ferrets, if I didn't already mention that, rabbits, llamas, sheep, potbelly pigs, goats, donkeys. I'm sure I'm probably forgetting some species that we've had in and out of here, but we're just trying to say no to people that are trying to surrender animals and stick to taking care of the ones we have here and not taking in any more except for special cases. So we have 44 horses, 15 dogs, 14 cats, including a feral cat colony that we are responsible for. We did the trap, neuter, release program with our local humane society. And then, of course, I think we have about 10 snakes that are actually part of the animal sanctuary that were surrendered. And then I have my own snakes in the business. So Jim works really hard, and he does most of the work on the ranch maintenance, like the outside stuff, like the barn and the fences. And he feeds the horses on the weekends, on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. He usually feeds them because he's off from his normal job. And then Monday through Thursday, I feed him in the morning. And then we usually feed together at night But tonight he went out by himself and started feeding so I could get ready for this. So he's a hard worker and he's tired because not only does he help me out here with my business in the animal sanctuary, he still works a full-time job in Colorado Springs. Jim usually takes a nap and then gets up and helps me at night and then goes back to bed and then gets up and goes to work. So he sleeps he has split sleep. Whereas I go to bed about 5 or 6 in the morning and sleep straight through till noon. So I think he has it tougher than me. So hopefully one day he'll be able to retire from his regular job and help here with the animals full time. But he does really well with the snakes. I don't think he would have snakes if he wasn't with me, but he does really well with the snakes. I mean, he's not afraid of them or anything. He picks them up and I mean, it's not an issue. So I feel like the snakes are a lot easier to take care of than the mammals. So the horses get fed 2 or 3 times a day, and that's in any kind of weather. So the other night, the country's had all this bad weather. If you're outside of the United States, we've been blasted from coast to coast with weird extreme weather in one place or another, either severe low temperatures, high winds, lots of snow, flooding, rain. We had high winds and low temperatures here earlier this week. And last week, it got down to minus 37 degrees Fahrenheit wind chill. And we had to still feed the horses and take care of the outside animals in that. And so that really stinks. Yeah. So when I look at the big picture, the snakes are really easy because they're in a nice warm house and I can just walk around here and take care of them. I don't have to walk miles outside to different pastures and sheds and stuff. So it's really fun to do horse stuff in the summer, not so much in the winter. I feel like Colorado was lucky though, because so many parts of the country had it much worse than us. We have a little bit of snow, I don't know, maybe 4 or 6 inches, but nothing like Buffalo, New York, or some of those places that have had people lost and that have died due to the extreme weather and things like that. So, Jem, somebody wants to know who your favorite snake is. So Jem spends no time with Cessna because Cessna is a gray banded king snake. And I got her as an adult. She was like 7 or 8 years old when I got her. And I named her Cessna after the aircraft. So Cessna is an aircraft manufacturer. It's actually the most widely manufactured type of private plane in the world is made by Cessna. And my dad is a pilot. And Jim's been learning to fly since he's getting close to retiring from his regular job. So I named this snake Cessna just for fun. And so I just said, I think this is Jim's favorite snake because it's named after a plane. But I actually don't know who Jim's favorite snake is. I know he likes TC, but I think that's just because he spends a lot of time with TC. Why are you hiding behind there, TC? Gosh, so antisocial. Oh, I see Kate's on here. So she is in California and says they're having a bad storm right now. She's asking what got Jim and I into sanctuary work. Okay, well, I'll speak for myself. I used to run my own business doing horse training and riding lessons, and I really, really enjoyed that. So I did dog training and I did group dog training classes. I did private horse training and private and group horseback riding lessons. And I did that for probably 15 years. I really, really liked it. That's what I was doing when Jim met me, and he helped me out with that. And Jim had always wanted a horse, so we got Jim his own horse. He's now got about 4 horses of his own. We used to do a lot of riding, a lot of trail riding, host a lot of clinics and workshops with different equestrian clinicians at our place. But then as my lesson horses got old and retired, like I just keep them because they worked really hard for me for a long time, and I would never give them up because they couldn't teach riding lessons anymore. And then we started taking in a lot of horses informally that people wanted to give up. And I was already also involved with the local collie rescue, helping them out, doing dog training and fostering dogs. And then I became a board member of Ruby Ranch Horse Rescue, which is a local horse rescue here. And so just through all of this ancillary stuff, we were taking in some rescue animals, a lot of rescue animals, horses and dogs. And then people were, I say dumping. Sometimes it was legit. People had to get rid of their animals for really good reasons. But most of the time, people just don't want them anymore because they're tired of them and they don't want them anymore, or because I can't ride this horse, so I don't want it anymore, or I'm tired of this snake, I want to get a different one, or this dog's not working out for me. Just all sorts of reasons that I don't think are appropriate. We ended up with all of these rescue animals. And so my dad and Jim said, we really need to start a 501c3 because we're not getting any help with this. We need to be able to take donations. We're going to go broke. We need to be able to take on volunteers to help. And so in 2014, we established a board of directors. There were some other people locally that were involved in horse and dog rescue that we started the board of Spirit Keeper. Then it was Spirit Keeper Equine Sanctuary we were going to try to stick to horses. That didn't work out. So now it's Spirit Keeper Animal Sanctuary. But we incorporated into 2014 as a 501c3 nonprofit, and we're an official Colorado charity. And so we've been doing that now for 8 years, and we still don't really get that much help. We do get some donations. Those are tax deductible if you donate. We get a few people that volunteer, but I'm really not sure in the long run that it was a good decision or not. But that's how we got into it, just sort of as a side effect of other things, of helping other rescues, and then me keeping all of my lesson horses from my business. So that's what happened. Now, would I recommend that you go out and start some kind of animal sanctuary and a 501c? Not really. It's really financially not lucrative unless you already start with money to sustain it. Especially now with the current economy, our donations are really down this year. So that's the reason Jim still works full time, is his salary really sustains the animal sanctuary. And I have my retirement from my city job that sustains like our utilities and the snakes and the dogs and cats. But Jim really bears the burden of taking care of the animal sanctuary. So it sounds good that I'm going to rescue animals and start an animal sanctuary, but it really is financially not lucrative. It's a burden. And I don't know, in some other countries it's different, but in the United States, the government does not help you. There's not programs for nonprofits and for animal rescues and sanctuaries. So you're on your own to fund it privately or to solicit donations. And that's all on you. Ashley, I'll talk to you about that enclosure. And yeah, it's unfortunate. I was listening to the Animals at Home podcast a few weeks ago, and Dylan interviewed someone that had a reptile rescue, and I heard them basically saying the same thing. I think she said that her full-time job funds the reptile rescue, and that they've had to stop taking in animals at the time being because they can't afford to keep taking in animals. And that's where we're at. We're not taking in any horses or dogs right now, and snakes are on a limited case-by-case basis. And so we ask that people fill out an application either for assistance or for admittance. And we do have assistance programs. We have educational assistance programs if you have a special needs animal and you need help learning how to care for it so that you can keep it. We have programs where we can help with buildings and fences and help. We really want to help people keep their animals and not give them up. But we also have a rehoming assistance program where we try to help people match up animals they can't keep with new homes. And then on a limited basis, we admit animals to our physical sanctuary, but people have to fill out an application for admittance. And I've talked to probably a dozen people in the last month that some will call crying and really distraught, and they need to surrender their animal, and I'll send them an application and they never fill it out and send it back. So I don't understand that. The people that usually take the time to fill out the application and send it back we work really hard with to make sure that we're able to help them in some way. And that usually works out. But I don't understand why some people just don't even bother to fill out the application, because we can't help you if you don't fill it out and send it back to us for assistance. Yeah, Kate says, unless you have rich board members, it's hard. And it is. All of our board members are basically middle-class working people that still all just work a regular job to support their families without extra money to give to the nonprofit. And we have a handful of donors that donate a little bit every month, and one donor that usually donates kind of a large sum every year. And so all of that put together, I would say funds about 20 to 30%, and then the rest is on us. But yeah, I would go back to work and get another job in the city if I had to before I would let anything happen to the animals, but we just can't take any more in. And I think what happens is people want you to just take them. They want to just drop them off and be done with it, and they can't even be bothered to fill out paperwork or give you any information. So it's unfortunate. What other questions do you guys have? I was going to write down all of the announcements that I had, and I got busy and didn't. I told you about the calendars, the shirts, and the notebooks. I told you about the Colorado Reptile Educators. Okay, so here is a question. I've introduced my leopard gecko to her bigger enclosure, and she has gone crazy ever since. She's missing her prey sometimes because she's so hyper. Should I still go slow with the introduction? Yes. So I have a lot of questions just based on that. So my question is, how big was her other enclosure, and what was in it, and what was her behavior like in the other enclosure? And then how does that translate to her new enclosure? Because if there's a lot more empty space in this enclosure versus her other one, you may just need to fill it up with more stuff so that she doesn't feel that there's so much empty space in there. So with a bigger enclosure, the snakes or lizards or other animals get more space to move around in, which is absolutely great for them. But if a lot of that space is empty, it's going to make them feel insecure. It could make them feel insecure. So you want to take that larger space and really fill it up with stuff so that they feel like they're literally moving a greater distance around the space, but they feel safe the whole time. So if an animal doesn't feel safe, that is absolutely the foundation of any other behavior that you're going to try to modify, or any training that you're going to do, is the animal has to feel safe. Once they feel safe, then you can work on behavior modification and training. I would also ask what the feeding routine was before, and if you're sticking to that. So actually, the person that asked that question, if you email me at behavioreducationllc@gmail.com, I would like to get more of a history about your gecko and just ask you a lot more specific questions, and then we could go from there. Or this is a good time for me to let you know that I do have a Patreon, and that's where I, for the most part, do all of my behavior consultations and training and coaching, is through live video chats and Zoom and interactions over Patreon. And we have a private group where not only do I talk with you guys, but you can talk with each other. And so that's for as little as $5 a month. You get to attend office hours where you can ask me questions. You get to attend 2 live streams per month. One is just open questions for me and discuss things with other people. And then the second one, we usually go over an article, like a journal article, a video, or something that I've kind of assigned to you to read or listen to or watch before our chat, and then we talk about it. So definitely, if you feel like the issue that you have is going to be more involved than like a Facebook message or a YouTube comment or maybe one email, then consider the Patreon, because that's where you're going to get the private coaching or the group office hours and a lot more one-on-one. How is living in Colorado and keeping reptiles? Asking about the temperatures. So my Morelia Bredli absolutely thrive here in Colorado. It's very similar to Alice Springs, Australia, which is where they're from. So, dry. Sometimes it's wet, cold at night, warm during the day. The winters are dry and cold. My Bredl's pythons actually really thrive here. They don't have any issues. Each snake does have a humid hide, so they do have access to humid microclimates, and I do provide hotspots for all of them. But honestly, my 2 Bredli that are out most of the time, they don't really go back to their hotspots. They find like places in the house under skylights or just up by the ceiling, or on top of things that generate heat, and that's where they like to lie if they're looking for heat. They always shed perfect. So I think that species and other species that are native to Colorado, like I have a hognose snake, I have corn snakes, I have a bull snake and a gopher snake. They all do really well in this climate without me really doing anything special. Like they could all live in open air. Like one of my Bredl's pythons, his enclosure is an open air net because he just didn't like his PVC enclosure. He didn't like a glass enclosure. He just constantly wanted out and surfed the surfaces, but I put him in an open air mesh type enclosure and he's perfect. He's so content in there, but his species is suited for this climate. So my species that are not suited for this climate, like the royal pythons, the reticulated pythons, it can be challenging to keep enough water and humidity in their enclosures and to keep them exposed to enough of that. Some of them do really, really well because they use their human microclimates when they need to, but I have others that tend to want out a lot, or they're just not using their humid environments. And then sometimes they'll have a little bit more issues with shedding. So it can be challenging. As far as snakes that need really warm temperatures, or really cool temperatures, I try to stay away from those. I keep the house at 78 degrees ambient during the day and 74 ambient at night. This is Fahrenheit. But in the summer, up until this last year, we didn't have air conditioning and it could get 90 to 100 degrees in here. So we did install central air conditioning last summer. And now I'll be able to maintain the same temperatures, ambient temperatures during the summer as I am able to maintain in the winter. I'm reading the chat. Oh, Danielle's here. Hi, Danielle. Danielle is one of my patrons, and she asked me a question about recommended reading lists for dog behavior and training books. And I gave that to you, so I hope you got it. So I really recommend anything by Gene Donaldson, Ian Dunbar. There's a really good book. Let me grab it. Is this it? No, I thought it was right behind me. It's by Michelossi on basically canine cognition, behavior, and ethology that I really like. Dr. Christina Spalding just released a book this year on stress and your dog, but obviously it applies across species. So anything by Ken Ramirez about animal training in general or dogs specifically, I would recommend. And I did send you a list, Danielle. Reading. Bonjour to whoever told me that. You're either in France or maybe in Canada, some French-speaking country. I have a French riding instructor. I actually haven't ridden with him since before the pandemic, but his name is Jean-Luc Corneille. He lives in the United States now, but I've been studying with him for quite a while. I studied with a German riding instructor before that and actually went to Germany and rode with him. So I speak a little bit of German, not so much French. I'm pretty fluent in Spanish. I like languages, so I'm always happy to see all of these people from all over the world. And I used to travel a ton when I was younger. I used to live in Germany and I traveled around Europe. So I'm excited to have friends, since we have the ability to have these virtual meetings and Zoom and FaceTime and YouTube and Facebook. I just love having friends and colleagues from all over the world. It's really exciting for me. The Grand Cricket says they're new to the channel, so welcome. Yeah, I put out 2 to 3 videos a week, so there's a lot for you to catch up on if you're new to the channel. I can't believe I'm able to keep up with that many videos, but there's just so much as far as animal training and behavior. And basically the Tuesday videos every week are just me training snakes. And so I'm obviously doing that all the time. And so I film almost every training session I do, and then I just pick the best ones and put them up on Tuesdays. So I guess until people get tired of watching that, I'll just keep doing that every Tuesday, is put a training video up. And then on the Thursdays and Sundays, I usually try to do an educational topic. Night temperatures are under discussed. Yeah, people, yes, I talked to a lot of people. And yes, you do need to provide heat at night if your home is really cold. But I turn all of my heat and lights off at night for all of my snakes. No one gets night heat here. And my ambient temperature in our home is 74 degrees Fahrenheit. So all the species I have here do fine with that. If for some reason I see that an area of the house or a room is dropping below that, I provide a heat mat as supplemental heat at night. But then during the day is when I turn on all the heating and lighting for them. So at night, I just turn everything off. I do provide real rocks underneath their basking lights. And so those do stay hot after the lights are off, just like rocks would out in nature when the sun goes down. And they do dissipate heat during the night and are cold by morning, but they're dissipating some heat all night. And I've checked that with my temperature gun. And I think I did a video about that, where I checked a rock every couple of hours to see how much heat it was giving off. I might have to repeat that experiment because that was pretty neat, but it worked presumably just like it does in nature. The rock got really hot during the day, and then I would turn the light off, and then it stayed warm through the night. And then, by the time the sun came up, it had cooled down, but then it would start warming again when I would turn the light on. Okay. So Dick Dastardly is saying that they have to have a class 1 breeder's permit to keep hognose here. So hognose are weird. Here in Colorado, you cannot buy or sell Western hognose snakes or plains hognose snakes because they're native to Colorado. So you can't buy or sell native species here in the state, but you can own them. So someone can give you one, which is how I got my hognose. Someone gave her to us, and you can wild collect them, but only up to 4. So I could go out and collect 4 bull snakes from my ranch and keep them, but I couldn't collect any more than 4, and I couldn't sell them. So it's kind of weird with hognose here. Yes, we can own them, but we can't buy or sell them, and we can't have more than 4. I just have the one. Her name's Hazel, and she was given to us. Let's see. Okay, back to the leopard gecko. I've only introduced her to her enclosure 2 times for 20 to 30 minutes. Then I put her back into her smaller temporary tank. So my question is there a way to put her smaller temporary tank inside the larger enclosure and allow her to come and go from it as she pleases? Because I've truly found that is the easiest way to acclimate new animals to new habitats, is if you can put whatever they're already inside of the bigger enclosure and leave the door open or cut a hole in it and just let them go in and out as they feel safe. That is the absolute smoothest way to transition them to a new habitat. But if you can't do that, then the way you're doing it is fine. I've used the larger enclosure basically as an enrichment space, an exercise area, until eventually the animal moves into it. Okay. So Kate is saying her gray banded king snake hates all enclosures except a mesh playpen. Yeah, I don't understand. Actually, I mean, I don't know for sure. I was going to say, I don't understand why some snakes prefer that. I've seen that here too. Since I've been using mesh playpens, or like the mesh that you put around plants outside to keep bugs off of them, or like the things you raise butterflies in, or the soft-sided dog crates that basically have mesh that you can see in and out of. Many of the snakes seem to prefer that to a PVC or a glass or other type of enclosure. And I can only imagine, maybe it's the fresh air, maybe it's a sensation or feeling like they're more free. And I don't know. I mean, unfortunately, I can't ask them, why do you prefer this over your PVC enclosure? Why do you prefer this over a tub? Why do you prefer this over a glass? But I absolutely, one of my Morelia Bredli, he wasn't too interested in really coming out much. He very well target trained, and he would shift out for weights and stuff. But until he turned about 3, he wasn't really interested in coming out on his own. And then all of a sudden, and I noticed this a lot, they hit about 3.5 years old, and suddenly they're Mr. Adventurous and they want out all the time. And he started coming out every night. Like, just all of a sudden he was coming out nightly for weeks. And it got harder and harder to put him up, and I couldn't watch him all the time. And he's not as big as my full adult ones. And so I would put him in these exercise tents, or this mesh thing that goes around trees outside. And he would be fine in there, but I would go to take him out of there and put him back in his PVC enclosure, and he would immediately try to get back out and nose rub and push on the door, until one night I just left him in the mesh. And that's where he's been ever since. There's already another snake in his PVC enclosure, and so he's living in the mesh now. And for that species, it's not an issue. He's a Brettles python. The climate here is fine for him. It's similar to what he would be living in where they're native to, so it's fine. But unfortunately, for some of the species we keep, like royal pythons, if you're not in a climate that's similar to West Africa where they come from, it's really difficult to maintain adequate climate control in mesh. And so that's where it becomes a problem, where if we're not providing a microclimate in there, or if we are and they're not using it, we have to force them to go back into a climate controlled space and just let them have enrichment time in the mesh. But if you're lucky enough to have a species that does fine in the ambient conditions, then as long as they can't escape and it's safe for them and they're doing well in it, I think it's just fine. Same with outdoor keeping. I mean, Colorado would be impossible. It gets so cold here in the winter, but I think in places where you can swing outdoor keeping, if you have a species that's appropriate for you to keep outdoors where you're at, I think that has to be wonderful for the animals, because it's so much more natural. Missouri. So Dick says he lives in Missouri. I don't know where in Missouri. I'm originally from just outside of St. Louis, Missouri, and my parents still live near St. Louis, Missouri. So hi, I'm kind of familiar with that area. I grew up around there. Who is behind me? TC is on this thing behind me, loose. Did you see another snake behind me? Oh, this snake in this enclosure, this is Bennu. He is a 8-year-old Morelia Bredli, so he's a Brettles python. He came here when he's 4 years old, and he does really like to come out, but he can't come out unless I can supervise him. And he was surrendered to us for biting and being cage aggressive. And so I've worked with him a lot. He's doing really well with target training. I have no problem handling him, but I have to be really clear when I'm communicating things to him. And he does respond to the dogs and people walking around. And if he knocks something off of a counter, he'll actually bite and wrap it, like a shampoo bottle or any inanimate object. He'll bite the dogs if they walk by. So I don't know how he was raised. And I have 3 of his sisters and 1 of his brothers. So in fact, Spock, the one that's living in the mesh, who comes out every night, is super friendly. have no problem with. It's just the best snake. So I don't think it's him. I think it's probably whatever happened to him in those first 4 years, the interactions he had with humans or other animals or the way he was raised has contributed to the fact that he has this biting problem, and it seems really motion triggered. So, because like I said, it isn't necessarily just a person. He's knocked a jacket down and bit and wrapped it. He's knocked, plastic bottles off of counters and bit and wrapped those. So it isn't just like, oh, I'm going after living things. It's motion triggered. So I really have to monitor him when he's out. And usually I let him out when it's just me and him here. Like the dogs are all outside, my husband's not here, I'm just working. I let him out so that I can watch him. But I do have him in a super big enclosure so that he has more space to move around in there. And I don't feel as guilty about not letting him out as often. But he also does very well in the exercise tents and things. Yeah, I used a Zen 4x4x2 habitat for an enrichment area for a long time until TC took it over. And now TC lives in it, but now he still wants out of that all the time. So TC is just one of those snakes that no matter what, he just values his freedom. Freedom is very reinforcing, and control is very reinforcing. There's study after study that shows organisms find control over their own behavior is a primary reinforcer. And that certainly is exhibited in some of these snakes like TC. Like, it doesn't matter how big his enclosure is. If the door is shut, he's going to be trying to get out. That's not every snake. Some snakes that glass surf or nose push, you put him in a bigger space with lots of environmental stimulation, that stops. And that's great, but sometimes it doesn't. And that's usually snakes like TC that it wouldn't matter how big the enclosure was. If the door's shut, they want it open. And that's because control and freedom is a primary reinforcer, right up there with food and reproduction and water and shelter and all of those primary resources. I don't speak Portuguese, but I do speak some Spanish. So Portuguese and Spanish are very similar languages. So Dick is saying he speaks some Portuguese, or do I speak any Portuguese? And he says, Happy New Year. I can read that much. Danielle, I got the list. Yeah, that book, I recommend to Danielle a book called How Dogs Learn, and it's really about the science of canine cognition and how their brains work, and a little bit of history of how those studies have emerged over the last 50 years, and it's a good book. It is on Audible. Okay, so somebody's saying the audio is choppy. Our internet is choppy. So we have 2 internet service providers, and I keep 2 because I never want to lose internet completely. But really, we live about 40 miles from the nearest city, and we just don't have good internet. I have better cell phone reception. So sometimes I jump on my cell phone if I'm doing Zoom meetings or live streams and the internet gets too choppy. So yeah, you guys just let me know that. But what usually happens is it goes in and out. Yeah, New York has a lot of restrictions on what can be owned there. So I don't know how to pronounce your name. Grillidae. I'm talking about your leopard gecko. And if there's any way that you can put your entire enclosure in the new bigger one and let the gecko go in and out as they please, that's the best way to transition smoothly with minimal stress. But if you can't do that, then the way you're doing it now and exposing them to it for a little bit at a time is fine.
Somebody wants to know if you're gonna post this later.
Yes. Yeah, this will be posted up later. So Kate's saying one of her Dumerose boas prefers the playpen. So Kate, I thought Dumerose boas were from a drier climate. So I think that should be okay as long as he has access to a humid hide, but I'm not sure what temperatures they're used to. I know Danielle's done a lot of research on that recently because she's trying to do a bioactive enclosure for hers. And I think that she said she has to design one that's drier. Yeah, the live stream will be posted, so you'll be able to go back and watch it. I am familiar. So the Grand Cricket is talking about the Orion Center for Indigo Conservation, and I am familiar with that. In fact, I've referenced them in a few videos that I've done and a few papers I've written for school. Yeah, they raise up a lot of their adult indigos outdoors with minimal. So the training they do there is different from the training we do for pet snakes because they don't want those snakes that are being released into the wild to be tame or acclimated to people, but they want them to be trained and acclimated to how to survive in their natural environment. So the training they do is remote training where they're setting up the environment and training scenarios that take the human out of the equation. So the snakes are learning on their own how to do things like find food and live outdoors so that when and if they're released, they're able to survive. It's really fascinating. Okay, I think I'm caught up on the chat now. And Danielle is saying that Dumerals only need 40 to 60% humidity. That still sounds high to me because here in Colorado, sometimes it gets down to 20 to 30% relative humidity, which is why I provide every snake here a humid hide, a humid microclimate with damp sphagnum moss in it so that they can access that if they need a more humid area than in their enclosure. So I'm gathering Dumerals boas need higher temperatures because Kate said she's worried about the 75-degree temperature, not the humidity. So when I do have, all right, so depending on the type of mesh you have, Kate, if it's a dog pen, a lot of times that mesh keeps some of the sun out because they're presuming people are going to have dogs or cats in them and they sit them outside. And so they want shade protection. But my Brettles python is in a mesh that is meant to protect outdoor trees and plants from bugs, but still allow sunlight in. So I actually have a basking lamp over his mesh and stuff. I have a heat source and UVB and everything on the top. I hung it off the ceiling so it's beaming down on the top of his mesh, and he has a platform up there that he can get on. But that particular mesh is designed to let the sun through, so it lets his lamps and everything get through. I think if you have the dog style crate, it might deliberately be trying to shade the tent from those rays. But I think you could still provide extra heat if you put like maybe some kind of a heat source on the outside, as long as you made sure that it was safe and wasn't going to melt the material, not touching it, but maybe near it or above it, or maybe even just put a space heater in that room where he's at to just raise the ambient temperature around his tent a little bit if you're worried about the temperature being too cool. Ashley is asking, what is my contingency plan for if we have to evacuate? So I actually used to work in emergency management. So when I worked for the city of Colorado Springs for 3 or 4 years, I was the community animal response team coordinator. And I did that in conjunction with the police department and the Office of Emergency Management. And I was in charge of training animal emergency responders to do animal rescue. And I was worked with volunteers to set up animal emergency shelters, and I trained citizens on emergency evacuation plans for their animals. So what my plan is, if we have to evacuate, first of all, we have a whole entire animal sanctuary here. So it isn't just the snakes. It's 44 horses, 15 dogs, 14 cats, and then all the snakes. So with all of that said, the snakes are not the most difficult animal to evacuate. If we had to leave in a hurry, in every room, I've got snake bags and tubs sitting in every room. And I could just go by and open enclosures and start throwing snakes in tubs and bags and carry them out to my cargo van and stuff them all in. You know, it's not ideal, but they would all get out. Same with the dogs. They can just come with us and jump in vehicles. The tougher part are the cats and the horses, because cats, when something is out of their routine, they hide. It's hard to catch them, and it's difficult to get them into carriers. And then we have 4 horse trailers, but we only have 2 vehicles to pull them. Can't take all 4 horse trailers at once, so we would need help. And then we can't take all 44 horses at once. So we would have to take a few and come back and get the rest, and we would have to shuttle them. So it's not ideal. That's like the last thing we would do is evacuate. We would try to shelter in place before we would evacuate. And hopefully we're in an area where that's just not a likely scenario, you know, where we're not at risk for, obviously, like things like hurricanes, tornadoes, you don't get time to evacuate from. Wildfires, we are basically a dry lot, so there's really not much to burn on our property. But if things burned around us, we could evacuate because of smoke. So we're just hope that never happens. But yeah, I mean, we can pretty easily get the snakes, and that would be more challenging, because the snakes, I mean, obviously, I'm not going to target them out and try to do it in a minimally aversive way. I'm just going to grab each one out and put them in a container and go. And I have all of those containers in each room ready, either snake bags, pillowcases, or tubs that I can just grab and put snakes in. And if you have a single snake or just a few, I recommend that you get a tub ready and label it ahead of time too, like with their name and information and what they eat, in case you become separated from the animal. And I also recommend microchipping your animals. So our horses, snakes, dogs, cats, they're microchipped. I do the microchip implanting here, but veterinarians can also do the microchip implants. And that's because if you get separated from your animal, you want a way to get reunited with them. And you think you would recognize your animal, but in an emergency, in a situation where everything's out of context, you might not recognize. I had people that didn't recognize their own horses when I worked 2 actual events when I was the cart coordinator, the Black Forest fire in 2012, the Waldo Canyon fire in 2012 and the Black Forest fire in 2013. And I had people that came to claim and look for their own animals, like horses, and couldn't recognize them. So I recommend microchipping. And also that way, if somebody tries to claim an animal and says it's theirs, but it's yours, you can prove that it's yours. I did have that happen too, where people came and basically stole animals that way. They came and said, that's my animal. And that's a whole nother thing where the shelter workers need to make sure that they're only releasing animals to people who they can confirm as the owners. Okay. I'm reading the chat. Okay, so back to the leopard gecko. Her person is saying that she's seeing more wild behavior in her smaller temporary enclosure. And I'm assuming that is compared to before you were letting her spend time in the new, bigger enclosure. Again, I would need to ask you more questions, but sometimes if she's been in like a small quarantine tub and didn't know any better, then she didn't know any better. But now if you've been letting her into this bigger space and she likes it and she finds it exciting and she finds it reinforcing, and you're putting her back into a small space, she may be more hyperactive because she wants out. But I would have to really ask you a lot more questions to find that out for sure. But I have seen that in some other snakes and lizards, where now they know there's more available. they don't want to go back into the old little thing. I do chip my snakes. Yes, I microchip my snakes. Okay, oh, wait. Somebody's saying, oh, the grand cricket. Having to evacuate for a hurricane is one of my biggest worries. I put together a few extra bins over time, but I worry that there's something I haven't considered that could come up. As far as evacuations, a container to safely transport the animal in, information about the animal on the container in case it gets separated from you, like what it eats, how often it eats, how old it is, what species it is if it's a reptile or even an exotic pet. I had people that were working for me at the shelter during the Waldo Canyon fire, and during the Black Forest fire, that didn't know what to feed some of the animals in the shelter. So we had a lizard in there, some kind of a lizard. I don't remember now what kind it was. This was in 2012. And the shelter worker said, we ran out of its food. What should I do now? We can't get a hold of the owner to bring more. And I said, call the zoo, call an exotic veterinarian, call a pet shop, find out what that species eats, and see if you can get a pet if you don't know what they eat. And I ran into that in 2013 where we had some potbelly pigs in the animal shelter, and the volunteers were just feeding them all the time. And you can't feed pigs all the time. They'll overeat and get sick and vomit. So, I had to correct that. So things come up. And I think if you can write down information about what your animal eats and how often on the container you're going to evacuate them in, and then you become separated from that container, at least it'll be written on there. I also recommend some way to permanently identify that animal as yours, whether through microchipping or you've got video of it or photographs of all four sides of it and at all angles, or so that you can positively identify it's yours. You've got veterinary records, you've got receipts, you've got something indicating this animal's mine, I'm the owner, and I can prove it. Okay. Oh, Ashley's saying her vet apparently won't chip the snakes. Mine does, but I also do my own. Okay, so Third Gray is asking, how does one reinforce snakes following a non-food target? My yearling Brettles are learning faster than I am at this time. So with that, you always want to use one specific target with food. So whatever target you've started with that you're using food as a reinforcer with, you always want to use that target and reinforce with food. If you also want to do other training and reinforce with something else, use a different target. So for example, the snake that is supposed to live in this enclosure, who is hardly ever in it now, she follows a round blue disc to shift, to station on a scale if I want to call her down from wherever she's at in the house. And then I reinforce that with food. But she has another target. It's called a lollipop target. It's a round green ball on a stick that I reinforce with freedom to explore. So for example, I started out by pairing that with opening the door. I would show the target and open the door, show the target, open the door, show the target, open the door. So she learned that if she saw that target and she came to it, the door was going to be open and then she would have an opportunity to come out. So you can pair other things with different targets. But you always want to use food with that original target that you're using for super important stuff. Like one time Ronan got into our furnace closet, and even though he'd eaten just a few days before, I targeted him out and I fed him again because I didn't want him stuck in the furnace. So I showed him the target. He came out. I fed him a little food. So in circumstances like that, I feed him anyway in an emergency. But if you just want to do it for training purposes and for an activity for you and your snake to do, you can use other things besides food as a reinforcer. And Brettles love their freedom. So you can certainly pair a different target with freedom to explore, like with access to an activity station or access to an open door. You absolutely can pair it with that. And then if you wanted to do something like, okay, you can shift out onto the scale, you pause, and then you can go explore. if you want. You can use it that way. I've done that with a corn snake where, okay, I'm using freedom as a reinforcer, but on the way to your freedom, you've got to sit on the scale for a few seconds. I'm reading the chat. Oh, Natalia is saying, in what event? In an emergency, Natalia? She says, in that event, I learned not to have permanent enclosure furnishings she can wrap her tail around that I can't fit my finger in. She wrapped her tail around slats of a shelf and wouldn't budge. So I'm not sure what that was in reference to. If we're still talking about evacuations, yeah, it's really great if everything in the enclosure is removable, just for that reason. If there's an emergency and the snake or lizard is in it or on it or grabbing onto it, and you can just lift the whole thing out to save time, that's better. So Hannah Parker is asking about an African Cape house snake that she's been target training for a couple of months. She's responding to it, and it seems to be going well. I don't have any experience with house snakes. They're really small. Garrett Hartle is starting to breed them, and they're just so tiny. I'm not sure. So I have worked with very tiny snakes. Like corn snakes are very tiny when you first get them. My Escalapian snake was very tiny when I first got him. I really prefer medium snakes, so that because I do so much free work with them, like work at liberty, you'd call it in the horse world, where the animal's free and you're sharing space and you're working together in a free space and the animal's not restrained or contained. I like doing that with my snakes, and you really can't do that with a tiny snake. So it's very important, like with corn snakes and some of these tiny snakes, that they become very proficient and very reliable at target training, and that they have shifts with bottoms in it in case you have to lift them in and out of things, and that you have proper containment in your training area. And I use the tents and the soft-sided dog crates and stuff a lot for those species, for those small species that I can't just let roam around. But I would think that the house snakes, that type of snake, have all learned quickly. My Escalapian snake and my corn snakes and my rat snakes. So I see no reason why your house snake wouldn't pick up on it really quickly too. Okay, so Ashley says that she took her snake to the vet and it wrapped its tail around her glasses and wouldn't let go. Yeah, so you want to really be careful when your snake or lizard or any animal is holding on to something and you're trying to get them to let go. I want you to remember, like with a snake, let's say the snake is coiled around something. We all know that they can uncoil on their own. Like that's a natural body movement they can do. But it's different when you're forcing it versus when they're choosing to do it on their own. When they're choosing to do it on their own, they're just unwrapping their tail. But if you're trying to force it, they're going to be resisting you, and you're trying to force and they're resisting, and you can accidentally harm them. You can pull muscles or you can fracture bones. So you want to be really, really careful. And when I'm unwrapping a snake from something, I usually start at the very tip of the tail and literally just unwrap it carefully, and then let it wrap around something else that is movable, whether it's my arm or a stick. So I try to go with the animal as much as possible instead of against them. And it can be challenging, especially I know TC likes to wrap around my glasses too. And the smaller the thing they wrap around, the harder it is to get them unwrapped from it. So Kate is saying that Garrett and others say the house snakes are very Antaresia-like. If that's true, I bet the house snakes are great to train. And I've heard him say that they are like tiny children's pythons. And if that is the case, the children's pythons are so smart and so easy to train. In fact, an upcoming Training Tuesday video is my little one, Marcel, doing training. And for all of you who have issues with the Antaretia being bitey and nippy, I raised him from a little baby and I don't have that problem with him. I'll show in that video. Well, I took him out. So he targeted on the activity station and ate, but then I just go pick him up and I put him back in his enclosure. And not once did he try to bite me or go for me or get over exuberant with me. But I raised him from like 8 weeks old. The adult children's python that I got at like 10 years old, I still have to be very careful with him because sometimes he will strike and nip when I don't want him to, like outside of when he should. He's a lot better since I've been target training him, but it's been a lot harder to train the adult. I did a video. So you guys that are talking about the emergency evac stuff, and like the Grand Cricket says that they didn't think about labeling the emergency bins. I did do a video or two about emergency preparedness for snakes and other reptiles. One specifically was ways that you can identify your snake and prove it's yours. And I think I talked about in another video or maybe the same video about containers and things you can have ready to put them in. But they're older videos. They're probably a couple of years old now. Ashley says, I love how TC has no cares with you, Lori, when you are picking him up. Yeah, he's really tame. And again, I got him at 8 weeks old. And, you know, I've target trained him since the beginning. And I've set parameters with him since the beginning. And I've just never had an issue with him. In tomorrow's video, behavior I hear from other retic owners, which is like they're constantly trying to bite and they fly out of the enclosure at you with their mouth open. I've never seen that behavior from mine, so I can't relate to that. But I've raised him with parameters, with clear contingencies, with clear communication. So I've just never had an issue. Lauren says her one ball python that doesn't act like a pet rock just spent a really impressively long time cruising around the outside of his tub before voluntarily going back in. I love hearing things like that. Yes, Kate has my children's python's clutch mates, and she says neither of them have ever bitten, and that she's also had them since they were hatchlings. So I think if you raise them, I say properly, if you raise them in a reasonable way with clear contingencies, with training, establishing clear communication with them, and predictability when it counts and novelty when it counts, that you just have a smooth interaction with your snake. Versus this snake behind me that I mentioned was surrendered for biting. I don't know how he was raised for 4 years before he came here, but he bites everything. But it's not just living things. It's like stuff that moves fast in front of him, he'll bite. Not so much anymore. I've had him now. He was 4 when he got here. Now he's 8. So I've had him 4 years. So he's much better now. But I'm just saying, I have his brother and 4 of his sisters, and they do not behave that way. And so, and I raised them from babies. And so I'm sure if I raised him from a baby, I'm 99% sure he wouldn't have any issues either. So these children's pythons, like Kate and I've raised them from babies, they're fine, but we've established parameters with them, communication, contingencies. We've made life predictable for them in the ways that it matters. And we've provided them with novelty and enrichment in the ways that that matters. And I think they're well balanced. I know now 3rd grade saying I would really enjoy a house snake. Garrett has also said that I need a house snake, but they're so small. Small snakes freak me out. Joshua is asking, do I have any experience with bull snakes or anything in the gopher snake family? Yes, I have a gopher snake and I have a bull snake. And my bull snake, Rodney, is in tons of my videos. So you absolutely need to check those out. I've raised Rodney since she was 8 weeks old. And she has been in a bunch of videos. I handle her all the time. Before the pandemic, she was one of my outreach animals. She is target trained and she's trained to do puzzle feeding and foraging exercises. She's been tons of fun. So you absolutely need to check out any videos with her. I do have a playlist that I think is it labeled bull snakes or bull snakes and rat snakes? But if you just Google, go into the YouTube search and put Rodney or bull snake, lots of videos with her will come up. And I really like her a lot. But I also have wild bull snakes that live on my ranch. They're native here. So in the summer, I can walk right outside sometimes and see them. Yeah, Rodney the bull snake. So third grade says her house snake is 3 feet at a year old and she will get a little bigger. That's not too bad. So that's also about the same size as an Antaresia, which is like the Antaresia childrenii, the children's python. Yeah, so Natalia says she found my channel because of Rodney, because I got Rodney from Snake Discovery several years ago. She is the daughter of Brad and Janet. And I know that their bull snake Janet died, but Brad was the mother and Janet was the dad. And so they sent me Rodney and said it was a male. And then I did genetic testing of her shed through Rare Genetics Inc. And it turns out that Rodney was a female, but I didn't change her name. So Hannah is saying curious, reserved. Oh, she's been bitten a couple of times. This is by a house snake. She thinks it was before she started target training and she forgot to wash her hands after petting the dog. And then one time it accidentally bit her hand instead of the pinky. So my snakes don't care about the dogs, or if the dog smells on me or there's a dog right next to them. But the cats, some of them react really, really badly to cats. So my mom had been handling some of the cats here, and then Rodney, our bull snake, wanted out the other day, and I opened the door and my mom put her hand up to let Rodney crawl out onto it, and Rodney smelled the cats and sniffed my mom really intently and then turned around and went back in her enclosure. But then later I went to let Rodney out and she climbed out onto me. So either it was just a strange person, but I would venture to guess it was because my mom had all the cat hair and the cat smells on her. Yeah, one thing I'll say about the bull snakes in training is sometimes, like I did a target training session with Rodney 2 nights ago and she did just fine. She followed the target several feet. She came up to it really slowly, but sometimes she'll get really exuberant and excited and bump the target with her nose and then back up and wait for me to give her the food. So that's the only kind of different thing I've noticed sometimes she'll do, but she doesn't always do it. And then she's also really good at foraging exercises where I'll hide food for her to find, and she'll dive underwater to get it. She'll open boxes to get it. You know, she's really good at that. Oh my gosh, you guys, it's 1 a.m. here. I totally missed the new year. I missed midnight an hour ago because I got so engrossed in the live stream and talking with you all and answering questions. I missed rolling in the new year, but okay, it's 2023 now. I wonder if there were fireworks on top of Pikes Peak. You didn't see them, Jim? Oh, my husband says that there's a cloud in front of the mountain and he did not see the fireworks. So I'll have to text my mom and ask her, because she and my dad live in St. Louis most of the year, but they have a home in Woodland Park, Colorado, which is up on the mountain. And so I wonder if they could see the fireworks. I wonder if she's watching the live stream. Mom, if you're watching the live stream, tell me if you saw the fireworks. My mom watches all of my videos and she really likes the snakes. It's 3rd gray. Where are you that it's 10 a.m.? Everybody chime in and tell me where you are and what time it is there now. Okay, South Africa. I have 2 other friends from South Africa. Okay, wait. Oh my gosh, Kate says they're having transformers exploding where she is. Okay, so Maine, Utah. Oh, Zachary, hi. I'm glad you made it. Zachary's in California too. I know he's an hour earlier than me. Nebraska, Washington State. My dog Galaxy, my smooth collie Galaxy, came from Washington State. Virginia. Oh yeah, Natalia lives in New York and she's visiting Virginia right now and took her corn snake on vacation with them. Toronto, 3 a.m. New Hampshire, South Florida, 3 a.m. So is my furthest person away at the moment in South Africa? That's really cool. I've never been to South Africa or Australia. I've been to Europe and Mexico. I've never been, I guess, to the southern hemisphere. Oh yeah, Ashley just went to Australia this year. Ashley is one of my patrons and she does the weekly private coaching with her snakes. And she went to Australia recently. I want to go, but I don't want to have to fly. I just want to beam there. I just want to be teleported from here to Australia and visit and then be teleported back. I don't want to have to go on a plane or a boat or anything. Ashley says 2 days of flying. Happy New Year. I wonder if my mom fell asleep early because I texted her and asked her if she saw the fireworks and she didn't get back to me. So I'm going to make this a New Year's Eve tradition. I'll do this again next year. You have to let me know if we should do anything special. I have to figure out how to use YouTube because I know there's a way to do activities during the live streams. So I'll have to figure that out within the next year, how to do like polls and games and things like that. One of the channels I watch sometimes does it like a trivia game and they do it through YouTube. So I'll have to figure that stuff out because I like to do activities. Oh, Ashley's at work right now. Ashley works at a jail. Oh, here my mom's texting back. She says, no, we couldn't see the fireworks because of a cloud. Aw. So, okay, nobody here got to see any fireworks. I guess we'll have to watch the news. Oh, so Natalia says, yes, it's a great tradition. Just have TC out again. Sunspear is actually in one of the back room. Okay. So because of TC, if you watch the channel regularly, you know that he is, I used to keep my training targets and tongs in a bucket and he would find them. And he would just sit and stare at the targets in the bucket. And some of the other snakes started doing the same thing. So then I kept him in like a little rack thing. And Sunspear and Boreth would find the targets and do the same thing. And TC would still do it. So now I actually bought a rifle case for like a long gun. And I emptied out the inside of it. And I have my training targets and tongs in a big, long rifle case now. And it's sealed up and they can't see them and they can't get to them. Except that in one of my back snake rooms, the one that I keep the warmest for some of the species that need it a little bit above where I keep the rest of the house, I still have 2 targets and 1 pair of tongs back there in like a little bin with the handle sticking out. And Sunspear is back there climbed on top of the enclosures where I keep that bin, and she's staring at those targets right now. So that is where Sunspear is right now. She's in a back room staring at targets, and TC is on this activity station just sitting there. And Borath, I don't know where he went. He was out here earlier, and I'm not sure where he ended up. So I have 3 snakes out right now. So 3rd gray, a Zoom call with snakes might be cool. I do Zoom calls for all of my private clients that sign up for that Patreon level, and I do it at a time when it's convenient for you. So middle of the night, middle of the day, doesn't matter. And I will literally coach you or do behavioral consults with your snakes right there, if that's what you want. And some people don't always need that, but sometimes we'll do an actual live training session where you're training your snake and I coach you. But then I also do twice a month group Zoom chats for my patrons. And I usually have snakes loose during those chats. And then sometimes other people, especially Paul Duran, I don't see him in the chat. He usually has one or more of his snakes out, or sometimes people will show. Danielle a lot of times has her snakes out. So yeah, we do that. It's super fun. This snake is Bennu. He's a 2 foot by 2 foot enclosure. And he does get to come out under certain conditions, but he was surrendered for biting. And so we're still working through some of his biting issues. And I am reading chat. This is a snake in the enclosure. Yeah, that's Bennu. Now, this enclosure up here is Sunspear's enclosure, but it's empty because she's hardly ever in it. But Borath and TC will go in Sunspear's enclosure sometimes and drink or use her humid hide or bask during the day if they're all out. And then Borath loves TC's enclosure. So actually he could be back there in TC's enclosure right now for all I know, because it seems like when TC's out of his enclosure, Borath likes to go back there and get in it. In fact, Borath spent several days in TC's enclosure with the door open. He just never left it while TC was in his shed cycle in the wooden box on top of somebody else's enclosure the other day. I still feel so fortunate that I can work from here now and let some of these snakes be out as much as they are. Yeah, this is a Bredl. So my favorite kind of snake is a Morelia Bredli, Bredl's python. I have 31 of them. They're the main snake that I work with. I had 34, and one died of a heart condition, one died of cancer, and one died of unknown causes because unfortunately he passed away like the night before Thanksgiving, which is a holiday here in the United States. So everything was closed the next 4 days. And by the time I got him in for a necropsy, she couldn't tell anything. We did send off samples to check for like disease and viruses, and it was nothing like that. So I would presume that it was cancer or heart issue, because those are the most common things that we're seeing in carpet pythons, unfortunately. Okay, Danielle, good night. Yeah, and I think that we need to go out and do final checks of our horses, because Jim probably hasn't thrown hay yet. So we feed our horses like grain and beet pulp and any special supplements and medications that they need, because most of the animals we take in through the sanctuary program are special needs animals, meaning special medical needs, special nutritional needs, some type of special care. And so then we go out later and we throw hay or alfalfa. And so that way it prolongs their feeding period, because horses in nature would eat like 19 hours out of the day. They would just be grazing. So we try to stretch out their feeding process as much as we can under captive management. And we have in the past left out hay all the time for them to eat. But it gets so expensive. We're paying $14 a bale for about a 60-pound bale of hay right now. And then a few horses overate when we did that, and we weren't able to continue to do that. We do have slow feeder nets, slow feeder bags, slow feeder feeders that you can put hay in, and there's like a mesh over the hay, and it takes them a long time to get the pieces of hay out. So we do all that we can to try to extend their feeding experience. But I think we still need to go out and do hay. Jim can maybe let me know that, but I really had a great time. I'm glad that you guys were all here. Do look for TC's Super Dwarf Sunday video in the morning. It's not going to be really anything special. I'm going to update you on how long he weighs, and you'll just get to see how he comes out of his enclosure, and you can show it to all of the people that say their retic lunges at them when they open the door and just flies out of the enclosure with their mouth open, because TC does not do that. So I'm going to let you guys all go. We ended up doing almost 2 hours. Wow. So if you're interested in Patreon, just check that out. I've got 4 or 5 different levels to choose from, and it's all explained what you get in each one. If you have some simple questions, I'm happy to answer 1 or 2 questions in YouTube comments, on Facebook Messenger. And then you can always email me at behavioreducationllc@gmail.com. If you're local to Colorado, come out and check out some of our live workshops that we're going to be doing through the Colorado Reptile Educators. I'm really excited about that. And I will see you guys next year, same time, same place. If I don't see you before in a Patreon live stream or in office hours, or right here in the YouTube comments or Facebook or something. So happy New Year, everybody. And thank you so much for all of your support. I really appreciate it. Yes, I'm on Facebook. You can find me on Facebook through Behavior Education at Spirit Keeper Animal Sanctuary or Lori Tarini. And I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and then, of course, here on YouTube. So you can find me on all of those social media. I am also on Reddit, but I don't really understand Reddit, and I hardly ever use it, but I am on Reddit too. Thanks, Kate, for being here. Thank you so much, all you guys, and I will talk with you soon. Bye.